Okay, welcome to the Seattle Code Crafters Meetup. This month we have Richard Sheridan with us. He's the Chief Storyteller and CEO of Menlo Innovations, and we're really excited to have him. Am I recording? Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I am. All right. Okay. Sorry, you had to check. Um, and he's going to talk to us on leading with joy. So, Richard, welcome. I'm really excited that you're here. Pleased to meet you. I read Joy Incorporated years ago, and it really had an immense um, effect on who I am and how I work and what I believe work should be. And so, thank you. This is really excellent.
Well, great to be with you, Paige, and other friends I see here, and new ones that I will be meeting through the course of this conversation. So I certainly have a deep sense that I'm among kindred spirits here today. So happy to share a message here with all of you. So this is a talk I give around the world, but I'm delighted to share it with all of you. And it is this idea, as psychologist Rollo May once famously stated decades and decades ago, that the opposite of courage is not cowardice, but conformity. And so I want to take you on a non-conforming journey. I have a hypothesis that words like joy and love actually have a place in our business world, particularly in our software business world. So give you a little bit of background on me personally, just so you have a sense of where did all this come from for Rich. So way back in 1971, round about the time Bill Gates was doing the same thing, I was touching computers in many of the same ways he was. Teletypes hooked to time-sharing mini computers created by Hewlett Packard. I happened to be in one of the first three counties in the nation that was offering computer science at the high school level in Macomb County, Michigan. Just happened to be in the right place at the right time. Typed in a two-line program. The computer clacked out on a roll of paper, "Hi, Rich," because that's what I told it to do, my version of Hello World. And I was hooked. I knew what I wanted to do the rest of my days. By 1973, I typed all of the Major League Baseball players into that computer so my friends and I could play our favorite Major League Baseball teams against one another. So you're looking at the guy apparently who invented fantasy baseball, apparently. Um, and I entered that program into a international programming contest and won the gaming category, which was the catalyst for me getting my first job as a programmer because the computing center that was supplying the compute power wanted to meet the kid who won the contest because it was a big deal for them too. And the director of the computer-based instruction program in Macomb County asked me a fateful question. He said, "Rich, do you want to work for me?" And I looked at him, I said, "Doing what?" And he says, "Programming." And I said, "You can get paid for doing this?" And so I had my first job as a programmer before I could drive a car. Created the first email system that Macomb County schools would ever see. I want to apologize to them for that. Um, and But it launched a career. And by 1982, I decided to leave there, eventually get a couple of degrees in computer science from the University of Michigan here in Ann Arbor, where I'm sitting right now. And that launched a beautiful career that actually kind of looked perfect. Every year raises promotions, stock options, greater title, greater authority, bigger teams, bigger office, more responsibility, bigger paycheck. My wife was delighted with the life I was providing for us and our family. My parents were very proud of me. And I went from programmer in 1982 to VP of R&D in 1997 for a high-flying Michigan firm called Interface Systems. And yet, you can probably hear the but coming. There was a far different line, a far more important line that looked like this. By my mid 30s, I wanted out. I wanted to get as far away from this industry as I could. Uh, I actually had an escape plan, which probably some of you will want to talk to me about later. I was going to start a canoe camp in the boundary waters of Minnesota. Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yes, you're right there with me. I've had literally people come up to me asking me how far I got with the business plan for that idea because they want to pursue it as well. My wife laughed at me though, and she said, "Really? Did you think our daughters and I will follow you to the boundary waters?" I don't think she had any idea how serious I was. But here I was in my mid 30s, trying to get out of a profession that I thought would carry me for a lifetime. And good news, my inner optimist kicked in. I was stuck in a room full of manure, and I knew there had to be a pony in this room somewhere, so I was determined to find it. And so, what was going on? Well, you all know in the software industry, we typically operate in chaos. Chaos is an easy thing to describe for software people, and to software people, it is uh, running from fire to fire, answering hot phone calls, spending long nights. I pulled a lot of all-nighters, a lot of late nights. I'd come home after very long days. My wife would look at tired me and she'd say, "Honey, you look really tired. Did you get a lot done at work today?" And I realized, no, I'd gotten nothing done whatsoever. I was busy from one end of the day to the other, absolutely nothing done, running from meeting to meeting, trying to put out fires. I might as well have come to work in firefighting gear. And yet, as sort of a metaphorical idea, I felt like while I was running around in firefighting gear, I was also carrying a sloshing gas can while flicking lit cigarette butts everywhere. And so most of the work I was doing was setting the fires that I eventually have to put out. And of course, when you're in chaos for too long in any industry, but software industry is famous for this, negative things happen. Big, bad, negative things happen. I used to have to over-explain this to a lot of the business audiences I talked to, and then CrowdStrike happened, and I was given a gift because, I just simply explained, system, in my view, that was probably in place at CrowdStrike. And so when negative events happen at any corporation, oh, I'm getting an unstable internet connection. So hopefully you're hearing me okay. Um, when those negative events happen, there's usually a corporate response. It looks like a big three-ring binder. We love our acronyms in the software industry, so we'll dub it the Software Development Lifecycle Process, the SDLC. It's a document filled with stage gates, templated documents, committees, standing committees, meeting cadences, sign off and approval procedures. We usually have to put a police force in charge of this just to mind the documents, and you go from chaos to full-blown bureaucracy. You go from the land of never getting anything done to, quite frankly, the land of never getting anything started because you're waiting for an approval or a meeting to occur or a sign off. And the trouble in the software industry, of course, is we had to keep moving forward. There was no choice. So you started placating the bureaucracy while operating in chaos simultaneously with a shadow IT group that you could work around the system through hallway project management. And so this was my life, back and forth between chaos and bureaucracy. As I began climbing the career ladder, putting me in charge of things like this chaos, I realized I'm going to try some new things. I'm going to back off the bureaucracy a little bit. I'm going to put together little stapled together documents, just you'll see light documents for just a few sign-offs, a few procedures and that. But it turns out that even that didn't work. And so eventually, as I got higher up the ladder, get rid of all this stuff. And there was always business buzzwords available to us. Back in the old days, it was ISO or that sort of thing, or, um, you know, CMM level 5 and blah, 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 or these days, Agile. And usually what that means when we adopt simply the vocabulary is we actually prefer chaos over bureaucracy. And so because it just feels like we're doing stuff, right? It feels active, at least feels like we're busy and we don't like waiting around. So this was my life, back and forth and back and forth. This was going. And that's what was going on down there. And I wanted out. I, I just I I thought I was pretty good at this. I'd gotten an early start. People were telling me I was good at it, and I started to believe maybe not. Maybe it's really good elsewhere. And then I started looking around and I found out nope, it's like this everywhere. And that pony in the manure for me was this realization that when these things are this bad, it also creates an opportunity. And so my journey out led me to authors and books. And I've always been an avid reader. But intriguingly, the books I was drawn to back then were not technology books. They were, what I realized was the problem that was I was really trying to solve was, how do we organize the humans more effectively? That's really the problem we face in all of our organizations, technology or otherwise. So I was drawn to books like Tom Peters' In Search of Excellence, Peter Sengi's book, The Fifth Discipline, on the art and practice of building a learning organization, uh, um, John Naisbitt's book, Megatrends, Peter Drucker's books on management from long ago. And all of these books were telling me the same thing, that yes, indeed, Rich, there is a better way to do things than is customary. Your job is to find it. And we won't tell you how these wonderful companies we described got there. That's left as an exercise to you. So I just kept searching. I kept believing one thing, and it was true. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. I would just know it when I found it. And that happened in 1999. I had what Franz Johansson in his book of the same name calls the click moment, where suddenly all became clear in an instant. Three things happened. I met a gentleman who would eventually become my co-founder at Menlo, James Goebel. I read a book, or back then a wiki, by Kent Beck on this thing called Extreme Programming Explained. And what I loved about that book before I even broke into it was the subtitle of the book was Embrace Change. And to me, that subtitle spoke to my heart, because it wasn't like learn to get along with change, coexist with change. No, this was wrap your arms around change and embrace it. Um, I love the concepts of iterative and incremental development to test-driven design and so on. The pairing thing intrigued me, but confused me. I didn't know why I'd want to cut productivity in half or some, amorphous thing, but, uh, but, and then I saw a video on an industrial design firm in California called IDEO. Nightline had done the deep dive episode, watched them redesign the standard shopping cart in 5 days. And I finally saw a picture of two things in that video. One was the thing that really drove me crazy was every piece of software my teams released, the users hated it. We eventually called them stupid users. And then we could write dummies books for those poor people. And I thought, does it really have to be this way? Do we have to continually diminish the people we intend to serve? And IDEO started teaching me, no, there's a better way to figure out what will actually work in the world. And it's about going out into the world the way an anthropologist does. And then I saw the environment that IDEO used for that deep dive, and that just really captured my heart, because up until that point, I lived in cube land, or I lived in dark, quiet offices. You would have to whisper as you walk through them. So, anyways, those three things happened. And in 1999, I changed everything about the way that public company worked. Not just the technical team, but I helped reinvent that entire public company. And from 1999 to 2001, transformed that company into something that looked then a lot like Menlo does today. And while I didn't use the word back then, it was definitely a feeling I had that I had gotten back to the joy I had experienced back in 1971, 30 years later. And suddenly, though, all was gone. The internet bubble burst. This wonderful experiment that I had created with James called the Java Factored Interface Systems went dark and locked. We had been purchased by a California company in Redwood City that had to shutter every remote office they had. And for the first time since 1973, I was unemployed. I went home and told my wife I'd lost my job. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and she said, "You're unemployed?" And I said, "No, honey, I'm an entrepreneur now." Remember, eternal optimist. It took her 6 months to figure out that entrepreneurship actually pays less than unemployment, at least in the early days. And so, but I lost everything in 2001 except for one thing. They could not take away what I had learned in those 2 years. And that's what I want to share with you today. And what I learned was this is not our journey to improving the process and the organization of our human teams to develop software is not about finding this perfect setting dial between chaos and bureaucracy. What I learned is you can throw this picture away entirely and replace it with a different mental model of how we should think about our human organizations. And I'm going to compare this model with the forces that work on an airplane. So every airplane goes up because of this classic force of lift that holds it up, created by the camber of the wings. There's a countervailing force of weight multiplied by gravity that's trying to pull it back down. There's a force of thrust provided by the propeller of the jet engine trying to pull us forward, force of drag that holds us back. So what I want to do is compare these forces at work onto the forces at work on a human organization. So I believe one of the most squandered energy forces on the planet is the lift of human energy. Why do I say this? Well, the Gallup group has been measuring our human organizations decade in, decade out, and the needle isn't moving. 70 to 80% of people are disengaged at their workplaces. This is a fundamental failure of leadership. We have to do everything we can as leaders to preserve that human energy and grow it. The weight that holds us down, the weight of bureaucracy, that bureaucratic workload, the stuff we do that we don't really need to do it the way we do it. The thrust that pulls us forward is the thrust of purpose, and the drag that holds us back is the drag of fear. And there are certain things we can do in all of these areas in our organization. This isn't meant to be exhaustive, but I'm just going to give a few examples to get to the right point of all of these. The thing I liked a lot about what Kent Beck was describing was the ability to go to work and work with clarity over ambiguity, the story card driven planning systems, and so on, and the ability to focus on a single thing at a time and get those things actually done. There were so many days I just started 10 things and never got anything done. But most of us get this deep satisfaction of getting meaningful things actually done. The weight of bureaucracy that we have to lighten up is meeting load. I often joke with my business audiences that if you want to suck the human energy out of an organization, I have to encourage them to not write this down. It is not a recipe and it's not a formula. It is sarcasm. I say, if you want to pull the human energy out of your organization, it's a simple three-step process. Number one, have lots of meetings. Number two, do not under any circumstances make any decisions in those meetings. And number three, if perchance by mistake you happen to make a decision, that's okay. Just don't act on it, and you will pull the life out of your organization. The thrust of purpose should be externally focused. I think this is something we lose sight of when corporations are making purpose statements. What thrills us as human beings, and I will tell you, I just believe this fundamentally about programmers in particular. We want to see our work get out into the world and delight the people it's intended to serve. That's it. Full stop. That's why we're in this profession. We are in a service-oriented profession. We want people who use the work of our hearts, our hands, and our minds to be so delighted they come find us if they can, and they tell us, I love what you did. You made my life better because of the work you did. That's it. If we could universally give that to programs, I believe we'd all work for free. Well, I won't work for free, but maybe others will. But this idea that every organization should be able to ask and answer two pretty important questions. Who do you serve? And what would delight look like for them? And then the drag of fear. There's so much fear operating in our organizations. There must be classes at business schools that teach people how to try and motivate people by creating artificial fear in our organizations. And there are things we should be afraid of, but most of the things that are created aren't actually real. They're just trying to motivate us. stupid quarterly death marches, for example. Um, so if we want to get our human organizations off the ground every day, we got to get these forces in the right balance. We can diminish fear by not making it part of our management system. We can lighten up bureaucratic workloads. That's why we've created a lot of these methods we use in the agile community. We can make sure we're doing everything we can to keep human energy high, make sure people understand our purpose, and it should be a worthy one that inspires. And if we do these things regularly and systematically, our little corporate aircraft will get off the ground every single day. And now there's a delightful confluence of language between flying and human organizations. And I love this. Next time you're in an aircraft and it pulls out on the runway, and pilot gives full throttle, they're watching the airspeed indicator rise to takeoff speed. They make a little move, just a little one, pull back on the yoke, creating a new angle between the nose of the aircraft and the runway. And that angle has a delightful name. It's called a positive attitude. And what I love about that phraseology is simply this. This is something each and every one of us is under personal control over. We can determine the attitude we walk into our workplaces with every single day. And it doesn't have to be a lot. We don't have to be Tigger bouncing all over the place. Just a little bit of positive attitude can do a tremendous amount to keep the human energy high around all of us. And we're all individually responsible for that. And we'll get off the ground. I love this little historic reference here. Wright brothers achieved controlled powered manned flight in 1903. Uh, Unbeknownst to a lot of people, there was a competing group in Washington led by Samuel Pierpont Langley. As soon as the Wright brothers achieved this flight, in this feat, and got the notice of it, got the fame of it, Langley and his team quit. That's so weird to me. It wasn't the end; it was the beginning. But I think it goes to that purpose. Langley and his team wanted the glory of being known as the first in flight. The Wright brothers wanted to fly. And I think this is what drives many of us in our own organizational pursuits, is probably why many of you are gathered here today with me, is you want to get your organizations flying. Now, shortly after this flight, Orville Wright was interviewed. And he told the world, don't get too excited. This isn't as practical an invention as you think. We've done the math, and believe me, the Wright brothers always did the math. And they said, we will never be able to build an aircraft that carries more than two people. That's it. The weight of the passengers, the power of the engine, the size of the engine to create that power, the fuel required, says we'll never be able to build an aircraft that carries more than two people. And so it's just not as practical an invention as you think it is. How do I know this? Well, I read it in a book about Orville Wright's life. I read that book in a 747 to London. 400 passengers, 50,000 gallons of fuel, flying at 500 miles an hour at 35,000 feet. Intriguingly, the first 747 flew in 1969, a scant 21 years after Orville Wright's passing. Almost in the context of his lifetime, this occurred. And the big point in all of this, as we pursue new ways of thinking, we have to realize we can, in fact, lift the human energy of our teams. And when we do, we have the opportunity to fly heights and distances that were previously unimaginable. And I believe this is what gathers us together in communities like this, is to figure out how can we get to those heights and distances. And so here's a little peek into the side of old Menlo. I showed, many of you got here early. I can even do a little bit of that here, just with the crowd. There's the current version, but this is our previous space down in the basement of the parking structure. And a lot of people come and visit. We get between 2,000 and 3,000 visitors a year who travel from all over the world just to come see this space that back then was in the basement of a parking structure. And they're coming to see something. They're coming to see, what does it take to create an intentionally joyful culture. And when they walk in, almost every single time, first visitors, the first word out of their mouths is, wow, because they can literally feel the palpable human energy. Now, this was a pre-pandemic picture of Menlo, of course. But I'm happy to say, at least for us, and it's a bit quaint now, we've seemed to be, a rarity. We're all back in the office again 5 days a week. So we can talk about that in Q&A. But at the time, of course, this wasn't that crazy to be in the office together. But what people noticed right away is two people sitting at a single computer. So we don't just pair our programmers, we pair everybody at Menlo. We found this to be one of the most powerful constructs ever discovered in organizing human teams. Our pairs are assigned and we switch them at least every 5 working days. So there's this rotation that goes on. And we are a custom software design and development firm. That's what we do for a living. And so people regularly, systematically, but slowly rotate between projects over time as well. So they're not only rotating with people they work with, but they're rotating between domains and industries and technologies. So this is absolutely a learning organization, as Peter Senge described it in a fifth discipline, because you're learning something every single day. This environment allows us to grow our team by an inch every single week. Uh, and of course, if you want to change the world, you got to try some new things. And this was obviously a big thing to try. Um, but the other thing we invented along the way was based on those experiences watching IDEO in that video. We invented a practice at Menlo called high-tech anthropology. And this was all based on a simple notion we had that was it is possible to delight end users with our work. But in order to do that, we have to study those users as an anthropologist would in their native environment, learn their workflow, their habits, their goals as human beings. So we have people on our team who are literally card-carrying high-tech anthropologists. And it's a great title, number one, but it's a wonderful occupation. And the delightful part of our team is the respect that exists between our software developers and our high-tech anthropologists. And so there's a lot of things. You can see the visual management systems. We still do that to this day, even though we have electronic equivalents for all of them. But what I will say is if someone had asked me in 2001, hey, Rich, what do you think is possible with this new way of working that you're toying with? I might have given an answer a bit like Orville Wright. I might have said two. I might have said something like, if we could get a software process down to the point where we have two or less emergencies per week, I think we'd be doing pretty well. And if somebody said, oh, come on, Rich, maybe they pushed Orville too. How about how about two a month or two a quarter or two a year?
Uh,
Why don't you set your sights higher than this? I would have said, come on, this is software. That's not possible. Just like Orville Wright said, it wasn't possible to carry more than two passengers. Well, we're 24 years in. And I'm delighted to report two software emergencies in 24 years. Now, I can tell you what an emergency is. Just because everybody asks, so what do you mean by an emergency? Well, we rebuilt the organ transplant information system at the University of Michigan Health System. That was about a 3.5 year effort. Early on in that project, a kidney came available and there was a patient that needed that kidney and they couldn't find the records in the database. You got hours to figure that one out as a full-blown emergency. When you have lives of people in your hands in the software you're creating, that's an emergency. I'm not saying we're bug-free or we're error-free, but I have to literally tell stories of emergencies to everybody out in the room here at Menlo, because the people who've only worked here have no idea what I'm talking about. And my life used to be running from fire to fire to fire to fire. We just don't have firefighting here. Again, you can ask me more about that in the Q&A. So, what are some of the things we've learned over the years that it takes to build a culture of joyful leadership? Start with that purpose. Understand who you serve. What would delight look like for them? Value leadership over hierarchical authority. I'm not saying bosses are bad and leaders are good. So we've all probably seen good and bad examples of both. But the point is you can lead from anywhere. You don't have to wait for a title, a box in an org chart, or some anointing moment to become a leader. Leadership can occur everywhere. And as the top leaders, we should be encouraging that. Pursue systems thinking over bureaucratic thinking. What I love about Agile and Lean and all the other offshoots of it, simple, repeatable, measurable, visible systems of work that are tangible and can drive actual work experience. And then there should be caring in all directions. Care down to the front line, care up to the top level, care across to our peers. It should be evident that we're caring for one another. A lot of people ask us about the pairing and wonder if people always get along, and they don't. They're humans. But what we've taught our team to do when there's conflict in the pair in particular, and not just in the pair, but anywhere in the organization, is to check in first with the human before you check in with the conflict. Look at the other person and ask a simple question. Are you okay? Because something might have happened in their personal life, either last night or somewhere in their lifetime that's causing some problem. Wouldn't it be neat to find that out before you launch into them about something that's got you bothered right now? And oh, by the way, it might be something you did. So just to be clear, you might be the source of the problem. Build an organization where we're learning together. I talked about that. The pairing construct is unbelievable for teaching and learning, and then become storytellers. I think we lose sight of the fact that storytelling is an art as old as human history, sitting at the foot of totems, sitting around campfires, building uh, stories into the anthems of nations. This is a delightfully human tradition that connects heart to mind, soul to spirit, concept to reality. Stories are what move people forward. And a lot of people ask me about joy and how does it compare to happiness? Are they the same thing? I've said, I don't know. I'm not saying happiness isn't something we should pursue as well, but I think in the kind of tough work most of us do in our professions, it would be impossible to be happy every minute of every day without medication. Um, and so joy is a much longer arc of work done well together. If any of you have run a marathon, I've yearned for doing that. People never look happy to me when they finish, but there is absolutely joy in that accomplishment. I've married off three of my daughters. And there is a simple, joy of parenting after that's summed up in that simple two-word sentence of I do. And then there's this kind of joy. When the fighter pilot lands the jet in low visibility and high winds under tough conditions, and once the plane is, secured and the crew and everybody is safe as well as the equipment, she can't wait to do it again. Joy. Now, where do you begin? Well, I'll tell you, the hardest place to start is the easiest place to identify, and it's in here. A lot of people say, hey, Rich, how do I get my organization moving forward? I'm like, no, you got to get you moving forward first. So let me tell you where this started for me. So 1997, I was promoted to VP. That's not me, and that's not my daughter, Sarah. Those are just iStock photos. But I took my daughter to work with me in 1997 on a take your child to work day thing that the Ann Arbor schools did. And she got to sit at my task desk watching the newly minted VP do his work all day long. Can you imagine a more boring day for an eighth grader or for an 8-year-old than that? It's like, what is she supposed to be inspired to like doing email for the rest of her career or something? And so, but at the end of the day, I thought, well, I better ask her because, her teacher's going to ask her. I said, so Sarah, what'd you learn today? Oh my, out of the mouths of babes. She said, what I learned, Dad, is you're really important here. I said, what? What do you mean really important here? She said, what I saw is nobody here can make a decision without asking you first. Oh, wow. She couldn't have called it better. I had created a hero-based organization and I was the number one hero. The only way to scale hero-based organizations is overtime. That's how you scale the heroes. And I'm looking across the table at this 8-year-old thinking to myself, I don't want to miss the best parts of being a dad. So I realized in that moment, if there was going to be change, it had to start here. I had to become a different kind of leader. I had to start handing things off to those around me. And I did. And it changed everything, including me. And so I get it. We all want to work on something bigger than ourselves. And there's a role for the top leaders of organizations everywhere. president can call a nation to the moon and safely back. But I want to tell a different kind of story, far more important, impactful one. And it happens at this McDonald's in Detroit Metro Airport to me. So I have a weakness, quarter pounder with cheese, large fry, and a Coca-Cola at this McDonald's. Um, and uh, every time I was here, this is the McNamara terminal of Detroit Metro Airport, there was this older guy named Mike who worked there. That's what his badge said, Mike. And he was hustling around this restaurant, cleaning our tables, picking up the stuff we carelessly left behind. But every time Mike got near me, he'd lean and he'd say, "Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin?" Every single time I was there, Mike was delivering that kind of spirit and attitude. And I was like blown away. I thought, man, are they lucky to have this guy? Where does he get this energy? And then one time I'm there, Mike's off shift, and this young kid is pulling out a sled full of garbage out of the back of the restaurant. And as he gets by my table, he leans in, he says, "How's it going? Have a safe flight. Can I get you anything? Can I get you a napkin?" And I'm like blown away. I'm like, what on earth is going on at this McDonald's? This is one of the least relational restaurants on the planet. It's not one of the least relational places on the planet, an international airport. And these guys are doling out kindness and napkins. So I grabbed Derek, the manager, and I thanked him. I said, "Hey, man, thank you. This made my day just an ounce better." And he thanked me for noticing. He says, "Rich, anything we can do to compete with the other restaurants nearby, we're going to try it." Now, here's the point though, because I get, people can get inspired by my talk and say, "Oh, you're so lucky, Rich, you get to do X, Y, or Z." It's like, I'm not going to let you off the hook. This is available to all of us because I'm pretty sure Derek, the manager, didn't go to McDonald's corporate and say, "Hey guys, could you form a committee to write a policy on doling out kindness and napkins?" No, he just did it. And here's the best part. It was free. I never even asked for a napkin, right? So the point is, all of us are wrestling with something in our organizations. And if we work in a big organization, it feels impossible for change to happen. But the point is, you don't have to change the world. You just have to change your world. Start where you are. Start inside first, like I said with my daughter Sarah story, and then start to change the people directly around you. And you can begin to be the change you want to see in the world. And the phrase that we use here at Menlo all the time is run the experiment. Try stuff. We encourage people to move away from that meeting culture and move to an action of take action over take a meeting. Just try stuff. Now, a lot of times people hear my talks and they go back to work the next day. "Hey, I've got a new idea. I heard this crazy speech the other day." And somebody looks at them who didn't hear what you heard, didn't see what you saw, didn't think what you thought. And they're like, "That won't work here. That's against policy. We tried that 10 years ago. It didn't work then. It won't work now." And the idea usually dies right in the moment because you're busy. You got 10 emails to go work on right now. And the idea just disappears like the morning fog. I want to arm you with a simple phrase. I get it, but let's try it before we defeat it. Let's run the experiment. Now, a famous one here at Menlo involves these little babies. 18 years ago, one of our team members had a baby. She was off on maternity leave, ready to come back, join an exciting new project. And grandparents lived too far away to help. Daycare was full. And so she didn't know what to do. And I said, "Bring her in." She says, "What do you mean bring her in?" I said, "Bring her into work." She said, "All day?" I said, "Sure." She said, "Every day?" I said, "Why not?" She was testing to see if I thought it through. The answer was absolutely not. And she said, "What if she makes a fuss?" I said, "Here's like a noisy restaurant. You'll never hear it." She said, "Come on. If she really makes a big fuss, people hate me." I said, "You're the mom. I trust you. You'll do the right thing. Let's run the experiment." That was 32 Menlo babies ago. We discover a lot when we run experiments, and when they involve little humans even more. We found out little Ellie here could pair program with dad. Ellie could go to design meetings with mom. Both mom and dad worked at Menlo. We found we could pair the babies just like we pair the programmers. We found it worked for extroverted babies just as much as it works for introverted babies. I'll let you decide which is which. We found out our customers behave better when you bring babies to meetings. They don't yell at you. They don't swear at you. They think you're awesome. So the babies became part of the marketing team. And I want to leave you with one big story here, and it's this, because a lot of people think, I get it, Rich, you're the founder, you're the entrepreneur, Menlo's a small firm, but this would never work in our company because we're too fill in the blank, right? Everybody's got a reason that it won't work at their company. But I want to tell you of a company called Mass Mutual Corporation, a 175-year-old, $30 billion a year life insurance company. You heard the talk you heard here, minus this story. And I encouraged them to run experiments, and they invited me back 6 months later to show me what they'd done. And Amy Ferrer took me down to the claims department in Mass Mutual, and she said, Rich, we're running experiments here. I want to show you them. She said, when we get to the claims facility where we process $3 billion a year in life insurance claims, the department I run, you're going to see helium balloons taped to people's desks in the sea of half-height cubicles. And I said, oh, cool. What are you celebrating? She goes, nope. Everywhere there's a balloon taped to a desk is a declaration by the person sitting at that desk, I'm running an experiment. Come talk to me about it. So that's the way they spread information about the experiments. I thought, wow, what a wonderful idea. I never said anything about helium balloons or, communicating your experiments to others. Well, we turned the corner and there are balloons as far as the eye could see. 6 months later, this is what happened inside of Mass Mutual. So I run up to Susan's desk. I'm like, Susan, tell me about your experiment, right? She made the invitation. She says, well, I'm the last stop before the check goes out the door. I've got a 3-step quality process, A, B, and C. The trouble is, if I find a mistake at step C, I got to go back and redo step B. That's the longest part of the process. So my experiment is do A and then C and then B because the order doesn't matter. And I thought, okay, that doesn't sound like a big deal. But she's just beaming with energy. I said, Susan, how long have you worked there? She pumps up. She goes, 19 years. I said, have you always been like this? And her face turned into a scowl. She said, no, I hated my job before. I hated coming into work every day. I said, really? I said, what happened? She says, now we can run experiments. I said, okay, what was it like before? She said, Rich, every idea I brought in had to go up 5 levels, over, down 5 levels, back again. She said, every idea I ever had before died on the vine. She says, after a while, you just stop bringing ideas to work. After a while, you say, it's just a job. I'll get my joy elsewhere. I said, and now? She says, now I love my job. She said, I don't even think about retirement anymore. I can't wait to get to work every day. And I'm looking across this room and there are balloons as far as the eye could see. Same human beings, same paychecks, same capital equipment, tremendous lift in human energy. If you don't think that can make a difference in any corporation, you're kidding yourselves. So, and again, in the spirit of not letting you off the hook, I get that Menlo looks intriguing and maybe you'd like to grab some part of it and bring it home, but you can't because we're too fill in the blank. Remember, this was Mass Mutual Corporation, a 175-year-old, $30 billion a year life insurance company, highly regulated, very bureaucratic. And they did this in 6 months because of the impact of a single leader. And it is, believe me, it is no longer your great great grandfather's life insurance company. Final story. Uh, if you have babies, you got to have dogs. We have dogs at Menlo. Don't think we have one in this morning. But the the gentleman who came in for his weekly show and tell in the orange shirt called me ahead of time and he said, hey, Rich, I'm coming in for show and tell. Do you mind if I bring Buster with me? And I said, sure, you can bring whoever you want. Who's Buster? He says, my Great Dane. I'm like, oh my, sure. Yeah, go ahead, bring Buster. Buster greeted me at the front door by putting his paws on my shoulders. His head towered above me. I'm 6'5". Buster was a gentle giant of a dog. And the point of this story is this. It's not about dogs, by the way. When Michael interacted with us, he wanted to be more like us. He knew we had dogs in the office, so he wanted to bring his. He couldn't bring in his dog where he worked. It wouldn't have been appropriate. Not something wrong with his employer's attitude about dogs. If you knew what he did for a living, you'd say, oh, there can't be dogs there for sure. But when Michael was with us, he wanted to be like us. And this is the opportunity we have in our organizations. If you're inside a big organization, other departments will want to be like you if you're delivering joy to the world within your organization. In this case, it was the external people who came in and wanted to bring part of themselves to us to be more like us. And this is the opportunity we have to take, as I said at the beginning, that non-conforming journey to joy. Thank you very much. I know I went a little long there, but I do think we got started a little bit late. I have no restraint my day today, so we can keep talking until Paige says we're done. So happy to take questions now.
Oh, that's super awesome. Thank you. I'm filled with energy and joy, and I very much appreciate hearing all of this. So thank you.
You are.
Yeah, let's do some questions, and we can again just go as long as we need to until we kind of get all the answers. Ron?
Yeah, yeah, Rich, I'm always delighted to be inspired by you.
Thank you.
I've got a question for you. Your anthropologists, do your anthropologists take developers along when they're studying their users, or is it the job of telephone, which we see in every other organization?
There is a job of telephone here, but the delightful thing is because we're a small company and we're all in one big room, Ron, it's literally what we call high-speed voice technology. So they're right near one another. So there is a specific role for the anthropologist to go out in the world, but it is not unusual for us to take others on the team, developers, project managers, QA people, otherwise. Sometimes we just need more people to do that work, so we take them. And some just want to experience it. It's very easy to wear different hats here at Menlo if you have an aptitude or an interest in doing so. So we don't discourage that at all. And there's other opportunities, Ron, for the developers to have direct contact both with end users and with the customers, which I make a big distinction in our world. A lot of people use customers and users interchangeably. We're very careful about that. The customers who pays Menlo to build custom software, that's our customer. The end users are the people who will use the results of our work day in and day out as part of their work lives. And, the two very different groups, of course.
And so there are other opportunities to spend time with customers and users. Can you elicit or spend a little bit of time on that?
Yeah. So, for example, and we code name all of our projects. We have a project right now called Kent. Okay, give you a sense of how we think about code names for projects. We have a little bit of humor in our DNA here. So, Kent is a project for a specialty steel manufacturer, just about an hour away from here. Clark Kent, Man of Steel, blah, blah, blah. So you get a sense of where we get our project names. And Alex and Silas, two of our developers on the Kent project, went out to the site today to be at the customer site for the entire day. They're going to do their work there the entire day. And in the midst of that work, they're going to lead an event we call Show and Tell. And so Show and Tell, and it's a little bit different than most people imagine it. Show and Tell is a weekly event in our iterative and incremental approach where we have our clients show us the work we did the previous 5 days. We don't show it to them, they show it to us. So what happens in those events is the client brings, in this particular case, this is an internal application for customer service reps who are going to take care of the specialty steel customers they have. And so those customer service reps get on the keyboard and we walk through every story card we got done and they show us the resulting software. Well, you can imagine in those scenarios, the user doesn't do it quite like we thought they would. Or they start asking questions. They say, well, what about this? Or could it also do that? And our programmers get to have direct contact, watching people. And this is what I think is so exciting about the opportunities we have in our industry to lift human energy. Showing the people who did the work, the people who used the work they did, is incredibly energizing, right? To get all of, so what we don't do is send the project management emissary to the show and tell. The entire team that did the work, even if they're not leading the conversation, is watching the people use the work they did the previous 5 days.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Excellent. Danny?
Yeah, I also was curious about the high-tech anthropologist. And so I'm curious, did you interact or learn from Danny and Jerry Weinberg with their work with anthropology?
I have not. I certainly know uh, them and know of them, but our we had built this practice along the way. We were inspired by many of the things we'd seen in the IDEO video. I don't know IDEO that well. People who do have looked at us and said, "You're more like IDEO than IDEO is." But that's because I think we took the essence of what they had in that. But we really were taken with this idea of going out into the world, and so we were really inspired, for example, by Alan Cooper and his book, "The Inmates Are Running the Asylum," and Don Norman, his book, The Design of Everyday Things. And Don's actually been to Menlo and sort of held court with all of our anthropologists, which is a pretty cool moment. Uh, but it's this idea of, in lean terminology, this go to the Gemba idea. And more observation than interview. This is where we often go wrong. We think, a lot of people, well, I asked the users what they needed and they told me and I built it. And now they tell me it's not what they need. Like, oh, that's because they're literally, and then a lot of times, they get branded stupid users because they didn't think to tell us. Like, no, it's just the opposite. They are unconsciously competent at what they do all day long. They don't even think to tell you the most important things because it's built into muscle memory. So our anthropologists are literally watching them do things. And we get the craziest reports from users when they're doing this because we get them to think out loud. And they'll start saying things like, "Oh, this is so easy to use. I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable using this." And then they start making series of mistakes, right? And they're like, "Oh, it's just me. I did it in my coffee this morning. I never make mistakes like this." But we watch the users over and over again making the same mistakes. And our view is, wouldn't it be cool if we just design those mistakes out of the system? We don't have to challenge them. We don't have to point out the mistake. We just observe the mistakes and then start changing the user's experience. And all of a sudden, the mistakes just start happening less and less. Why? Because we designed them out. Because
Could I
we
add a quick
noticed that the
follow-up?
users were confused. Yep.
How are your anthropologists trained?
Yeah. So there is no program we have found yet in the world that perfectly trains a high-tech anthropologist, and probably true for almost everything we do here at Menlo. The delight of pairing is this. When a new person joins, we don't literally have to set them aside and go teach them something. We just have them do work. We call it teaching through the ears and the fingertips. The pairing construct is let me just say this to a group that probably understands it better than anybody else I'll ever talk to. This is the most revolutionary concept in organizing human beings that I've ever discovered and ever will discover. We share it freely with the world. Everything we do, we're transparent with, right? These thousands of people come through every year. Nobody will do this. That literally, I'm showing you our secret sauce. And I mean, it's not like nobody else in the world pairs. And there's lots of examples in industry where we pair, right? Just think air co-pilot and pilot, right? That's the next, you're on an airplane sometimes. Somebody says, "Hey, the co-pilot's sick today, but the pilot's got it. Don't worry about it." No, we'd all be opening the emergency exits, jumping off the plane. So we come to accept it in certain professions, typically when lives are at stake, surgeon, co-surgeon, firefighter, co-firefighter, that sort of thing. Well, software holds the lives of people in its hands these days and holds the lives of companies in its hands. But anyways, the point is, we build our anthropologists. I mean, we'll start, we like people who've grown up in a culture other than the one they were raised in. In other words, that disheveling kind of feeling when you're in a culture other than the one you were born and raised in. We find that people who are really good at biting their tongue, because a lot of designers are like, "It's right there. It's really easy. It's right there. Just touch it right there." It's like, sorry, you're not shipping a designer with every copy of your product. So you might want to figure out what were they, our anthropologists have some delightful questions they ask when they watch users struggling with a new design that they're just experimenting with and they can't, they're noticing the users and finding things. They don't do the "it's right there," or "let me tell you how it works." because again, we teach them, we're not going to ship you with the product. So they simply bite their tongue and watch, and then finally ask this really sort of innocuous question. So what were you looking for? And then they do this crazy thing when they ask the question. They listen to what the person says. And then they change the interface based on what the person said. We were doing a diesel motor diagnostic tool once, and we had a button, really obvious button, like the only one on the screen that says start. And this is a diagnostic tool that's literally plugged into the control port under the dashboard for a diesel motor truck. And we showed the interface, and we always do what Alan Cooper calls goal-directed interaction design. We don't say, how do you like this? What do you think? How would you use this? We say, how would you use this screen to start a diagnostic test? Oh, we've given the user a goal. Now they're looking at the screen, and there's like one button on the screen that says start, and the person isn't touching it. And the anthropologist is like really confused. And finally, so what were you looking for? Well, I was looking for a button called test. And the anthropologist couldn't resist. He said, oh, we call it start. And the user said, I would never touch a button called start on a diesel motor diagnostic tool. Really? Why not? Because if I press start, my assumption is it's going to start the engine. I'm diagnosing the engine. That's the last button on earth. Like, oh, so what would you call it? Test. You know, they pull it back, put a little post-it, write the word test. Like, yep, that's what I push. They're like, oh, how easy is it? And, look, we're all frustrated. I mean, I don't care how adept we are at technology. We run into frustration moments every single day with apps we use, with stupid credit card reading machines and that sort of thing. And the question you always want to ask yourself is, I wonder if anyone ever watched somebody using this product before? And the answer is probably not. So hope that helps.
Awesome.
By the way, just to be clear, and Paige, you're A-okay. You just tell me when to stop. I can talk about this stuff all day long. I love talking about this. So you just keep going and you just tell me when to stop. So
I think you're in good company here. I think we'll all listen for all day long if we could too. A couple more hands. Alex, you've been waiting a bit.
Yes, thanks. There's a real irony here, by the way. We should not only teach and the anthroponists, but also the coders. Our business does not even uh, teach the coders really. You have a pool with cold water and you drop them in there and let's see that whether they swim. Oh, there are sharks in there. Ah, no one told us that. But that's a different story. I wanted
Alex,
to
let me
yeah,
bolster what you just said one more
yeah,
ounce.
yeah, sure.
It's also the stupid way we teach computer science at the university level.
Yeah.
We could just pairing. I've tried to get my University of Michigan to start pairing students together. And their answer is, well, how would we judge one versus, I don't know, pair the seniors with the freshmen and judge the freshmen on how well they code and judge the seniors on how well they teach somebody to code. I mean, so anyways, but I digress, but keep going.
Yeah. Yeah, what I wanted to ask you when I read your book Joy Incorporated, I always ask myself, because it's a co-located culture, of course, how did you manage those, I think 2 or 3 years of a different time? I don't want to say the name. You know what I'm referring to.
Yes, in the dark days. Yeah. Well, let me tell you, one of the things you realize when you create a culture like we've created is how adaptive they can be. It was remarkable. I mean, they adapted way faster than my poor brain did. And, quite frankly, the pairing part that everybody was intrigued about, they're like, how'd you do that? Like, are you kidding? That's trivial. Right? Put two people on a Zoom call or a Google Meets or, and just have a second screen with the code they're working. That was the easy part. The part that we got a little more struggle is how do the pairs communicate with the other pairs? And they adapted that within like 36 hours. What they did was they just had this brainstorm, and this is the typical kind of run the experiment moment at Menlo. There was no committee, there was no meeting, they just did it. Somebody said, hey, I can't find everybody else. Hey, everybody, why don't we just start publishing our video links in a Google Sheet with our names next to it? So if you want to find Rich and Paige, here's our link, and just go click on the link and we'll be in your call with you. And we were using Zoom at the time, and we were trying to get some new API calls into Zoom. We were talking to Zoom people, and they're like, no one would want you just jumping in their calls unannounced. And they're like, oh, at Menlo they would. And they like it was like mind blowing to them that we would be that collaborative a culture. But anyways, yeah. So 18 months of adaptation, it worked. I would say it wasn't ideal. There were things we could see culturally that we were losing. And what I tell anybody who's, trying to make a remote only culture work, because so many are, is you just got to do extra things. You can't, the things that come naturally when you're in a big open room, you got to have special constructs for, like we did. And in the other thing, and I would just say it out loud because it's worth saying, and I meet a lot of companies who are struggling with collaboration, and they're all remote like this. And I tell them, I say, well, are you cameras on or cameras off culture? And they're like, oh no, we're cameras off. I'm like, I'm sorry, I don't know how you do that. I can't, I don't have words to describe how a cameras off culture could work for
I
them.
understood that.
Yeah, I love that, and we've used that sort of like always on, always open Google Meet or Zoom room in several places. Several people here that I work with. It's really excellent. Steve.
Yeah, so I've worked and set up teams that are doing TDD, that are doing collaboration, that are having joy at work. And they've always started off small and they've grown some. Um, However, it tends to not stick very well. The
Mm,
rest of the organization, and we call it the corporate immune system,
yep.
starts to kick in. How do you get around things like that for larger organizations?
Well, I think any organization will have stickiness trouble if they don't consider what their reward systems are. And I'm not talking about financial rewards. That's the easy one. And quite frankly, financial rewards are the worst version of rewarding, as we know. But I'm talking about the things, well, so for example, when I remember I talked about the hero-based system I built in my old life. Well, hero-based systems means lots of overtime. It means you're the one singular tower of knowledge that knows everything about some subsystem and nobody else knows what you know. And that is incredibly rewarding,
Mhm.
right? Because you are uniquely qualified. Except the reward starts to feel like a prison after a certain number of years because you can't take a vacation without bringing your laptop. You can't go work on the AI initiatives because you're stuck in the COBOL code, and eventually, you realize that thing that you thought was your tower of knowledge was an ivory tower is literally a prison cell. And so, and there's a whole treatment of this in Joy Inc. that I would encourage you to read or go back and read, where I compare the existing rewards of my old team compared to the potential new rewards. Because as Janine Lamarche famously said in her book, Changing the Way We Change, she said, if you don't replace existing reward systems with newer, better rewards as quickly as possible, people will revert to the old rewards as quick as possible. Those rewards must be more satisfying than the old rewards. And the American culture, I'm guilty of it as anybody. People, oh, how are you doing, Rich? Oh, I'm working so hard I can barely see straight. And it sounds terrible. But it's like, oh, I'm so important. That's what I'm really telling you. They couldn't live without me. I can't take vacations because I'm so invaluable. And it's like that's a reward, right? And the Europeans all look at us like we're nuts. By the way, here's some Menlo high-tech anthropologists in their native environment speaking to a Menlo project manager. This is Andrew and Andrew and Lisa. I figured as long as they're sitting right there, I'll just show them to you.
Nice. No, that the Puritan work ethic kills us.
Yeah.
Wonderful book called Bullshit Jobs that is wonderful to read.
Yeah.
So let me also extend that a little bit. So obviously, if you can implement change and how the reward system is in place across everything, that works fine. However, how would you do that in a place where it's so big that you can't just change everyone's reward system and now you have a mixed environment.
Yeah, and I would say, there's no large organization on the planet that's going to operate the same way across the whole organization because
Mhm.
it takes time for things to ripple out. And I would say like I saw with Mass Mutual Corporation, Amy Ferrero was the leader of the claims division. She wasn't changing all of Mass Mutual. She just changed claims. But because of the helium balloon stuff and because claims was kind of approachable by the rest of the organization, people started hearing that
Mhm.
something interesting was going on in claims. And so now you go down to claims and you see all the balloons, and somebody says, like I did, what are the balloons for? It's like, oh, they're running experiments. And it's an invitation to go ask them what the experiments are. Well, all of a sudden people are like walking in, like, tell me what your experiment is. Tell me what your experiment is. And then they're going back to Amy, like, how'd you do this? She's like, I don't know. I went down, got a helium tank, got a bunch of Mylar balloons, started filling them up, gave them to people, and they start running experiments. And, there's so much that is that the simple but profound actions that can have these amazingly large consequential effects, right? Sometimes simple things can. And this is a leader telling her team, I give you permission to run experiments. I'm encouraging that. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I would just say, again, it's back to my McDonald's example. I don't know if any other McDonald's are doling out kindness and napkins, but I'll tell you this, from Tokyo to Berlin to Bangalore to Paris to Croatia to Reykjavik, people know about Derek at McDonald's because I've been telling them about him, and maybe that spreads news around. I don't know. So,
Love it.
Steve, I'm gonna compliment you on one thing because as a speaker, when you're doing a remote audience, there's one thing you look for is the audience getting what it is you're saying? Your physical reactions to many of the points I made along the way were delightful for me. So thank you for that.
Y- you're welcome. I love it when people do that for me, so I do that for others as well. So thank you.
Yep.
Excellent. Fortune?
Oh, hi. Thank you so much, Paige. So, Rich, it's always very interesting to me to contrast you with Apple, right?
Okay.
Apple always hires the cognitive scientists from the famous university. They hire the people with 2 PhDs in anthropology to be the formal anthropologists. But you have a much more informal process that is extremely successful. And I'm wondering how you made that work.
Yeah, I think we have a belief here that there's an amazing thing about humans. They're incredibly adaptable when you set clear, rational expectations. So, for example, people used to say, we've got an unusual hiring practice here. We pair people during the interview process in a large setting. So we invite 30 or 40 people at a time, pair candidates one with another. We switch the candidate pairs every 20 minutes to do 3 different exercises, and we simply watch how they work together. Okay. But what we do isn't just like this bizarre experiment and watch what happens. We instruct them what we're looking for. We literally tell them we're not trying to weed you out, we're trying to weed you in. So let us tell you before we even begin what failure looks like. Don't grab the pencil out of the other person's hand without asking permission. Don't ignore the person sitting next to you. By the way we're going to decide whether we invite you back to a second interview is if we see evidence that you're helping your pair partner look good, that you're helping another human being succeed. What's amazing, because now we have all these incredibly collaborative people coming like, how'd you find people like this? I don't think we did. We just set clear expectations for what we want from the people who work here. And humans adapt. They just do. Now, does it work for everyone? Of course not. And we aren't even going to pretend we can be all things to all people here. That isn't the point that should be true for any company. But what we have found, and I think this is more to your point, Portia, we do, by the way, have one PhD anthropologist who's one of our high-tech anthropologists. But the cognitive diversity that springs forth new ideas. And this is what I saw at IDEO. This was the IDEO video. If you go back and watch that deep dive video, they had this incredibly diverse set of people on their design team. They were not all coming out of, D school and that sort of thing, which is almost ironic because they literally invented the D school at Stanford eventually. But we just look for this diversity of talent because what we don't do, even when we promote here, we don't have a rubric that says you all got to fit this same set of check boxes to get to the next level here to make more money. What we're looking for is how do your efforts complement those of the people around you? And you just end up with this incredibly diverse team that's coming up with bizarre thoughts coming in from other directions because they just had different life experiences. And again, I can't dispute that Apple is incredibly successful, way more successful than Menlo. But I think the trouble with looking at an Apple or a Microsoft or a Facebook or a Google is most of the rest of us are not them. We operate in a different world. We operate by a different set of rules. We operate in a different level of humanity. I mean, it's just simply true. I can't afford to pay the people here that Apple can pay because I'm not selling 1 billion iPhones a year. We're literally selling our people by the hour. There's only so much that can scale from a revenue and profit standpoint that most product companies aren't constrained by.
Mhm. Thank you, Rich. I have to say that of all the people I have known who have worked at Apple, they have told me uniformly that they were very unhappy and stressed out.
Oh,
So, so I think that
well,
I think you have the right end of the stick
you
here.
know, I
And
mean, here's one
yeah.
thing we took very seriously from Kent Beck, back in the
Mhm.
sustainable work pace. That was the part that I was, quite frankly, I was tortured by. I mean, I was working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. My fundamental belief is tired programmers make bad software. They just do. Anything over 51 hours a week, you're putting in more bugs than you're taking out, and you're going to pay a decade for, all the technical debt that's created during that time. Here's the beautiful thing about a paired environment where you're switching to pairs frequently like we do. If we need more done, we can add more people. We fundamentally don't believe in Brooks' Law. In our view, Brooks' Law is a quaint reminder of an industry misorganized.
Mhm.
A hero-based, tower of knowledge-based system exactly conforms to Brooks' Law, right? But here, if we got 4 people working on a project and suddenly the customer comes in and says, we need to go twice as fast. In my old life, that meant 80-hour work weeks. And of course, you wouldn't actually get twice as much done, would you? In our world, we put 4 new people in with the 4 that have been on there for a while. And within 2 weeks, we've seen this so often, it's just common expectation here. You're a team working 40 hours of work a week, going twice as fast.
Yeah, that's great. So then that idea of adding more people to go faster, which, as you say, is counterintuitive for people with a traditional project management or hierarchical organizational mindset, brings up the question of AI. I know you've been doing some AI experiments.
Mhm.
What are those like?
Yeah, so far, I mean, we're not blown away by it. It's interesting. It's going to be a good tool to help with. We certainly aren't replacing our pair partners with AI. We've run some experiments to see if it could supplement their work. And I'm listening to the Co-Intelligence book by Mullick. Is that who it is? It's a good book, and he talks about. Centaurs and cyborgs, and that these are tools that are going to help us go faster. Yeah, the fact matter is, here's the truth about programming, and I think this is where AI is going to help a boatload. It's already helping me just in product searches, for example, when I'm looking for a new TV set. Most programmers spend half their day in Google trying to do some kind of research, right? They're trying to figure out how does this framework work? What's this construct? What is this tool that I'm using? If AI can help them sort that through faster, you're going to get rid of a lot of the drudgery. And and again, Ethan Mullick's book, I'm really appreciating, treat AI as a human, treat it as, an intern, that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot to be learned yet. Um, I do worry a little bit about we'll call it the autonomous vehicle problem of if we unplug from active engagement when we're actually needed to be actively engaged, we may not be able to hit the brake or the gas or turn the steering wheel quite soon enough, and we may end up, you know, creating stuff we didn't want to create because we weren't paying attention anymore because it looked pretty much all done and looked good. But again, check in with me in a year. This will be an ever evolving story. This is an important thing going on in the industry. There's no question. We probably all can feel it. Something big has just happened, just like when the internet came out and PCs came out and devices, tablets and phones and that. This is one of those kind of moments. Ellis, you've been so patiently waiting there.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. So I wish I had a question for you, but it's more of just a comment and a thank you to you. Absolutely blew my mind with thinking about education
Hmm.
in pairing terms. I just got out of school a year ago. I was leading a bunch of school efforts to get things involved and get people involved. I worked with professors who wanted people to come back into classrooms and actually meet people and talk to people and be collaborative for a couple of years trying to get that happening.
Yep.
And I don't know why I never stumbled upon that, even in a couple of years of working with everyone here and talking about pairing and mobbing and everything. And that just absolutely blew my mind. And I am going to go start talking to people and see if I can make that happen because that's genius. I love that
Well,
idea.
and so let me throw out a couple of things because some of you will be closer to these systems than I am. I believe Stanford did a really interesting experiment, and I don't know that they kept it going. I think they stopped it. And what they found by pairing like the freshmen is that women stuck in the profession longer than normal. They started graduating more women from computer science, computer engineering. Because let's face it, this this was in the early days. I mean, I remember this when I was, young and programmer coming out of college. It was kind of a 50-50 proposition between men and women in programming back in those days. And then it started to become a bro culture because quite frankly, we started making tools that were so hard to use and so stupid. I think the women just wisely said, yeah, you guys are working too hard at this. I'm going to go find something better to do with my life. And us stupid guys, we just put up with it, right? And then it started filtering out the women. And it's worse now than I think than ever. And then so that's one thing is I think pairing could really increase the gender balance in programming. The other thing is that this is mind blowing to me. I learned how to do TDD and automated unit testing from a professor at Michigan in 1980. Okay. I never heard about it again until Martin Fowler and Kent Beck started talking about it in the late 90s. No question in my mind. TDD and automated unit testing frameworks are the most revolutionary thing to happen in computer science in my career. And I've been programming since 1971. Okay. I got a little bit of, time in this profession. And this is the most revolutionary thing that's happened in software in the history of the industry. And it still isn't systematically taught at university level. And when it is taught horribly. I mean, we have to teach everybody who comes to Menlo how to do this, regardless of whether they ever wrote one before. If sometimes we have to unteach so that we can reteach. It is unbelievable to me that this isn't like there should be like a vote in Congress over this about computer science curriculum. Well, let's not go there.
Yeah, I mean that's just like all. I didn't even think about the equality angle. I was very lucky to be in a program with a very, very high female population, which was really awesome to see, and a lot of them stuck through the program. But I love that idea of because that's something I did. I gave talks on TDD and unit testing. We covered unit testing for a week in one class
Yeah, right.
in my school,
Uh-huh. Like,
and
oh
it
yeah, I
was
heard about
wild
that
to me.
once. Yeah. And look, I'm gonna go way out on a limb here. In my early days, every woman that I programmed near was way better than me. They were just better programmers. And they're more thorough. They think more completely. Maybe it's, more connections and brain. I don't know, but they were always so good. And I will tell you, one of the women who was really good, I didn't find this out till just a few years ago because it didn't dawn on me at the time, of course, or didn't have good enough recollection. So I sat in the cube at a company here in Ann Arbor next to Gloria Page, who's an awesome programmer. She used to bring her young son Lawrence in to work with her on a frequent basis. Somebody told me later, said, Rich, did you know Gloria? I said, yeah, she sat in the cube next to me. Did she ever bring her young son Lawrence in? I said, yeah, all the time, that nerdy little 10-year-old. They asked me, I said, did you ever think who Lawrence Page became? I'm like, what do you mean? Like, think about it. I'm like, oh my God, that little shit became Larry Page? You got to be kidding me. Lots of opportunities lost in my life, like the fantasy baseball thing. So,
Thank you.
you bet.
Awesome. So we have two more that I want to get to, and then maybe we'll wrap up after that, just because again, we could go for another couple
I
hours.
knew
This is
this would be
awesome.
fun, Paige. I could just
Yes,
tell from the moment we got together.
awesome. Yeah, Steve, what's up?
So I asked this question to crafters that come on and talk pretty regularly, and certainly at conferences. And if I were to meet you in person, I would have asked this ahead of time. Is why do you think, and so I'm going to talk about XP in general, but I'm talking about TDD, I'm talking about pairing, I'm talking about high collaboration, instant feedback, those kinds of things. We, the light bulb's gone on for a lot of us, and it is revolutionary in the only way that I can personally think to write software. Why hasn't it caught on?
Steve, have you ever seen the book by Everett Rogers called The Diffusion of Innovation? Okay, so great read, but I will tell you, based on your question, you just have to read about the first 60 pages. It's a pretty thick book. It was actually the basis for Jeffrey Moore's book, somebody help me out here because I'm not remembering the name of it, but
Crossing the Chasm.
Crossing the Chasm, yes. So the work Jeffrey Moore did in that was based on the work Everett Rogers did in the whole distribution of innovation, diffusion of innovation curve. And he said that the British Navy had proven to themselves in the 1600s that putting limes on seagoing vessels would cure scurvy. It was a horrible disease. And they proved it. They did this crazy experiment. They sent 3 ships, 1 with limes, 2 without. They had to stop the experiment halfway through because so many people had died on the other 2 ships. And they just transferred the limes and they were able to complete the voyage. They proved it in the 1600s. Took them 300 years to standardize putting citrus on naval vessels in the British Navy. Okay, so there's something about humans. We just, and they've got great examples in that book. And so I will say here, and let's take 2 examples in the world There's Menlo, right? We've been at this for 24 years. And I can tell you, 2 software mergers in 24 years. And I mean, so if anybody pays attention to space, a satellite just launched yesterday called IMAP. It's going to go study the heliosphere. Our team did all of the research science software for that over the last 4 years. Okay, so we work on really big, complex systems. We rebuilt the organ transplant information system, created the world's leading flow cytometer software. So, I mean, we're doing some pretty serious stuff here. 2 software emergencies in 24 years. So I think we got street cred here, right? Let's compare and contrast us with Pivotal Labs. You all know Pivotal. Pivotal was delightful. I never robbed me. A lot of people said I should have. They would have said you guys would have gotten along pretty famous. I heard he was a little more introverted than I am, or maybe he is. I don't know. But Pivotal was a delightful experiment in XP and pair programming. And then what happened? They got sucked up into the Death Star of VMware and blah, 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 and just torn apart. I've had people who were early pivots, as they called them, come to Menlo and literally tears running down their face because they could see that we had kept what they had lost, right? And so one of the reasons Menlo has survived, and it's a commitment that the founders had, and we will continue to, my co-founder just retired about a month and a half ago, but I continue to carry my heart is we're going to keep this privately held forever. I mean, if I can pull it off, Menlo will survive me and stay privately held. Okay. The trouble is, and again, it's like the reward system. Stupid quarterly death marches kill corporate cultures. It just is true, right? And so if all of your thinking is short term, quarter by quarter by quarter by quarter, you're not thinking like we are. And if you're not thinking about joy in the sense of purpose driven, who do we serve? What would light look like? And think about it all the way through the system, not just for the people you serve, but for the people who are doing the serving, right? Like Mike at McDonald's, who's going around saying, "How's it going?" He was bringing that energy, given what he was doing. I will just simply say, I think systems thinking is vastly underserved and underrated, just in general. And I know Eighth Light was yet another good experiment in all of this. They're out there, maybe. And I will tell you, it's been a delight. My biggest delight in my life was writing Joy Inc. Because the number of people who have read the book, who reach out to me later and say, just like Paige did, you changed my life. I've had literally people call me and I mean, look me in the eye and say, you saved my life. And they weren't just speaking metaphorically. And so again, I will I will continue to sing about this stuff, and share it. But I think that it requires that non-conforming, courageous journey. It just does. And I I'm on the advisory board at Michigan. I brought their professors here. They're the head of the department. When I shared with him about the pairing and I started toying with his brain, I could tell I was getting somewhere. I haven't won yet, but I'm not going to give up either. I'm still on the national advisory board here at Michigan for this.
Yeah. No, I completely get it. The adoption, uh, sterile technique versus ether is another interesting
Yeah.
study that you can do side by side. Adoption of ether took months, and the adoption of sterile technique took years.
Yeah. Semmelweis literally went insane. He was like, and look, I mean, I get it, right? I mean, people walk in here and they're like, so what are the ethereal benefits you get from cutting productivity in half? It's like, are you kidding? Right? And I tell them, I said, number one, we've eliminated the corporate hazing ritual of onboarding. Number one, like, what do you mean? They're like, oh, all the new people you put in, you stick over in a corner because they're not, they're smart, but they don't have the specific skills you need. And they're like, I put them to work in the first 5 minutes. I literally put people to work while they're interviewing here. So, uh,
Yeah, no, that's telling people that our time from when developers are released from QA until their name is on their first check-in is under 20 minutes. People are like, what? How do you do that?
right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you. And your book did change my life too. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Steve.
Yeah, Alex, you've been waiting a long time. Thank you.
Yeah, I can only say you did not save my life. I had to do it on my own, but you saved my inspiration. And and I see another irony here. The question shouldn't be why test-driven development and pairing is not there as the solution, but why the human-driven software development that you and Menlo are doing is not everywhere. That's the crucial question because technology won't save us, and technology basically won't increase productivity. What really increases productivity is gelled teams and basically the human aspect of our work. We need to communicate, but not only that, we need to gel and we need to trust the other people. And recently, I just wanted to add that here, I found something really marvelous in reinventing organizations. I'm not sure whether you know the book by
Yep.
Lalou.
Yep.
there was a picture in a visual edition where there was a slumped guy standing there, and there was a plank in front of his head, and there was only a little how's that called? Quadrat, basically a little tiny space through which he could see. And he said, we have 16 facets of our in our business life. At least we should have, but we only have one, rationality.
Right. Yeah.
This is the little thing that you can see through this plank. And that is the question we should be asking.
We're back to Plato's shadows on the wall and that sort of thing. But one thing I will say too is, those old books I was telling you about, John Naismith's book Megatrends, he wrote in 1982, and he said this, and this is so germane to where we're at right now, probably more so than it's ever been. He said the greatest advancements that will occur in the 21st century. So where we are now, remember, he wrote this in 82. So the greatest advancements that are going to occur in the 21st century are not going to occur because of technology, but because of a greater understanding of what it means to be human. And we're really wrestling with that right now, aren't we? We're trying to figure out, where do we fit in this world of AI, machine learning, robotics, and big data, right? Well, I'll tell you where we fit. We fit where we've always fit: creativity, imagination, invention, and innovation. And that's a human activity.
And for that, you need to be vulnerable. And everything is shut down if it comes to the
Fear
point
is
of vulnerability. If there's no
as
vulnerability,
Frank Herbert wrote so beautifully, fear is the mind killer.
yeah. Thanks.
Excellent. So let's finish up with Diana, because it's always great.
Thank you. Thank you. It's
So good to see you, Diana.
I know, it's so good to see you. And I didn't know you'd moved into a new space, and my tour was in the old space. So now I have to come tour again.
Absolutely.
Because only this time I won't bring the whole organization design cohort with me. But one of the things I was noticing, and as we were talking, is this whole concept about agile is dead. I did a little bit of research, and since I've been around since before the beginning, before the manifesto became public or was written even, one of the things I've noticed is that I've heard multiple agile is dead cries come out of the community. And last year I really started thinking about it. It's like, where did I hear it first? And when did I hear it? And what else was going on? And I realized that Agile is Dead actually sort of maps to the sections of the diffusion of innovation curve. That it started when it started moving from those early pioneers, the real fans like we are. A lot of them, when the early adopters took it over and needed to make some adjustments to it so it could fit for them, Agile died. It was just dead. And I wrote a thing that at that point, because I was on the Agile Alliance board, and I wrote a thing that said, no, we're just in our adolescence now. We're not, we haven't grown up yet.
And if you think of where Jeffrey Moore took the diffusion of innovation, research, right? And he talks about this chasm, and basically you're crawling across the desert through the chasm, right? And Pivot, I'll just pick Pivotal because it's so obvious.
Right.
They died, and we didn't. Right. And and I'm not saying we're thriving or anything. I mean, what's delightful about Menlo is because people ask, so it's a real business. Like, we're all funded by profits. There's no outside investors. There's no war chest. We just fund it based on the work.
So good. Yeah.
But the fact matter is that, you're crawling across the desert, and you got to survive. And so back to Steve's question of why isn't this more popular? I actually think, and I think Fortune and I've touched on this a little bit in the conversations we've had. There's a resurgence going just around XP itself right now.
Yes.
It's like being rediscovered or something.
Well, it's the word agile that has been marching through the curve now.
Yes.
Not the practices. The practices are lagging behind, but they're on their way. And it's just like the total quality movement didn't actually totally establish that customer satisfaction was a good thing and a thing we wanted to strive for. So while total quality movement kind of accomplished its thing and became lean and then moved on, right? The same is true with what we're doing. It's like the word made it through the lip service to agile, the lip service, like just like the lip service to customer satisfaction for total quality, was a thing, and but it stuck around. That's the piece of total quality that nobody questions now.
Right.
And so it'll be interesting to see when the practices that actually give us the kind of delivery that the manifesto was striving for. It'll be interesting to see when those practices do become, I hope I live long enough, I may not, but when those practices actually
You're
become,
still
well,
a
of
kid,
course.
Diana. You're still a kid.
Yeah, yeah, right. But when those become just, like customer service, well, of course we value that. Well, of course we think that's important, right? Of course we think collaboration is important and feedback is important, and we're not there yet,
And here's
but it kind of lags behind the word.
let
Yeah,
me let me offer one final thought here,
sure.
because I've just seen it now for 24 years.
Yeah,
We, we've been counting now since like 2013, seriously counting.
hmm
It's on average over 2,000 people a year who travel from all over the world, like you
That's
did.
so wonderful. Yeah,
And, and we're a weird company. We open our doors, we share everything we've learned with the world. We're not
yeah,
trying to keep anything a trade secret. And here's what I believe that piece of Menlo is such an important piece to this
yeah,
diffusion we've been talking about is
yeah,
you can read all the books you want. You can attend all the talks, all the conferences, be inspired by all the keynotes. You can have workshops. You can have,
hmm
anybody come in. But every once in a while, somebody says, you know what I want to see right now? I want to see an example. Just show me an example, right? And they come in here and all of a sudden it's like, holy heck,
yes.
that's what you meant by collaboration.
Yes.
It's
Yes. Yes. It's so
like,
awesome. Yeah.
and it's so powerful, right?
Right. Right.
And we've actually got you can see it right here on our little sales gong here.
Yeah.
It says an example would be handy.
Really right
Yeah.
now. Yeah, that Brian Merrick. That's Brian's. Yeah. He contributed that. Well, so I appreciate very much that your testimonial is the top one on the back of this book because minds who think together. Yes, great minds. Yeah. It's so good to see you. Yeah.
Great to see you too.
Yeah.
Excellent. Excellent. So I want to really thank you. This has been amazing and sort of refilled that joy factor that I think a lot of us feel. I've really enjoyed it. And in fact, Steve's kind of writing on the board behind us, as we're listening. And one of the things is he said, we're going to go out there in 2026 and see you. It will make it happen. So maybe we could do our first, Seattle Code Crafters tour, get a group of people together and actually go.
Hey, you know how you have that connection with the BC Computer Science Club? You should get them involved.
Wow. Okay. Great things coming out of this. But
You
I
know,
do want to thank you.
I will just say I knew this was going to be an awesome conversation from the minute I joined this group. So thank you
Yeah.
all. You have literally lifted my heart today, just in this conversation. So I can't thank you enough for that.
Awesome. Yeah, it says something when we've been talking for an hour and 45 minutes and three people have left. Yeah. So I very much appreciate that. I'm going to stop the recording now.